Hello, my friend. Welcome to As It Relates to Podcasting. I am your host, Simona, and I'm so grateful for you being here today as our beautiful 2023 comes to a close. I think today's episode is going to be particularly impactful for you because we're talking all about assessing our podcast foundation and how do we evaluate the content and its performance so that we can continue to create content, continue to build, continue to grow, continue to make impact. So I think the best place to start is telling you exactly why it's important to audit your podcast on a regular basis. There's a few different reasons why you want to do this. The first reason why you want to audit your podcast on a regular basis is to make sure that you understand how your content is performing and is it impacting in the way that you are wanting it to impact. This part is absolutely key, and it is a catalyst to your growth, and it's a catalyst to the continued impact that you will make for months and years to come. That is the foundation of why we want to make sure that we are auditing our shows. We want to listen for sound quality. We want to listen for voice recognition. We want to listen for the way that we pronounce words, the tone in our voice. Does it sound like we're smiling when we're on the mic? Does it sound too forced? Does it sound not excited enough? You want to constantly be taking inventory of your show and how the content that you are creating and portraying is coming across and impacting the people who are listening, okay? I will caveat and say this. I have a lot of points that I want to hit on today in our episode, and I have some notes that I want to reference to make sure that I hit everything. So before we get into that, I have to share this with you too. A well-audited podcast is a key asset for selling your programs, selling your services, and making money from your show. When you continuously are auditing your show, when you're continuously taking a look at how you're creating, why you're creating, and what you're creating, it impacts your bottom line. It creates a better relationship with your audience, and it establishes you as the credible source in the area in which you're speaking on. So I think that's really important to remember as well, because the better that we make our podcast, the more transformation we can provide, the more money you will ultimately put in your pocket, okay? So let's first talk about 12 different areas in which you can take a look at your podcast and start to do that audit on it, okay? After that, I'm going to give you a couple of additional pieces that you can take with you and implement. So this is going to be a super powerful episode. It's going to be jam-packed with information, and I know that you're going to learn a lot. So be sure that you are ready and taking some notes, okay? The first thing we want to do is content evaluation. So it's really important to understand the significance of the content quality that you are putting out. So that is the quality of your audio, the quality of your video, and the structure of your podcast episodes. Does the structure follow the same format with every episode? Does your microphone sound good? Is it too hot? Is it too low? Is it too echoey, right? Does your guest have good quality audio and video? And if you have a co-host, are you both invested and do you both have the technologies that you need to make sure that your podcast has the best possible content quality that you can have? I know a lot of people will say it doesn't really matter and you don't need to have quality audio on your podcast, but I honestly, genuinely could not disagree with that more. The audio of your podcast is incredibly important. The audio is the foundation of your content. People can watch video, but it's very hard to hear the video clearly without good audio. So at the basis of everything that you're creating, even your social media content, video content, YouTube content, is clear and crisp audio. You can edit this in post-production. You can do all kinds of stuff afterwards. The best thing that you can do is to set up your microphone and have it be flawless before you even hit record, okay? The next thing that you want to look at in terms of your content is assessing the relevance and the engagement of your episodes. Is the content that you're putting out there relevant to your audience, right? Are they engaging with your episodes, sharing it on your social media, sharing it with other people? Is your show growing? Then what you can also do, and we're going to talk about, metrics in a little bit, but what you can also do is you can take an audit, an inventory of the episodes that performed the best, which episodes did best, what was the content that people loved most? And then how do you take that and create more content like that every single week so that it aligns to what your audience is wanting to hear from you as well? So those are the two sides of content evaluation: the quality of your content and also the relevance and the engagement on your content. Okay. The next piece we're going to talk about is your analytics and your metrics. So obviously, if you have a podcast, you have a podcast hosting platform. On that podcast hosting platform, you're going to have all of your analytics. The analytics pull in from all the platforms, the podcast apps that you are on, including Apple and Spotify. Okay. And what you're doing from there is all of the content is coming back to this one place, to being housed in your hosting platform, and you will get to see your metrics and your analytics. So you want to have KPIs, key performance indicators. What are your KPIs for your podcast? What is your goal? Do you have a per episode goal? Do you have a per month download goal? Do you have a growth percentage goal? So what is that goal? What is that number that you are going to look at and deem if your show is hitting the targets in which you want or not? So I think that is super, super important. You can do things like downloads. You can also look at your listener demographics and your listener locations. This all impacts your message. This all impacts what you're creating, and it's impacting it because you want to understand where your people are, where they're listening from, the kind of content they're expecting from you, and also, is your content relevant to them? Like I was mentioning before, you want to make sure that you are going through and checking your stats and checking your analytics to see which podcast episodes are resonating the most with your audience so that you can continue to create content that falls into that type of lens. Okay. Super, super key. So when it comes to your analytics and it comes to your metrics, you want to make sure that you have your KPIs, key performance indicators. When you have your KPIs, then you have a benchmark in which you can judge and see and understand the success of your show. If you don't care about that kind of stuff, you don't need to, right? But you also want to know that if you're investing money into something and time into something, that it is creating the impact that you want it to create. And everyone's version of that is going to be very, very different. Some people want hundreds of thousands of millions of downloads. Some people are happy with 20 per episode and they're creating more income into their business, right? So your goals are specific to you. And all that matters is that your KPIs line up with your goals, okay? The next thing that we're going to talk about is listener feedback. So you want to continuously be encouraging your audience to provide you feedback over social media, through your email, through your newsletter, or even by leaving reviews. So you can do this in so many different ways. One of the ways that I like to do it is just ask. So I ask on my podcast, like right now, hey, if you're really enjoying this content, I would so appreciate if you could subscribe to the pod. And you could leave a rating or a review wherever you're listening, and honestly take a screenshot and share it with your community, because there is another creator out there that's going to need to know this message too. And so the more you ask people, the more you receive, right? So making sure that you are continuously encouraging your listeners to participate in the experience. And then when people engage with your content, making sure that you're responding back. That is so, so, so key. The worst thing is when people post something, all kinds of people respond and you go ghost and you don't even reply. I won't even lie. I'm pretty bad at that sometimes. So I apologize for that, but it's something that I'm working on. And it's something you can be aware of. And it's something that you can continue to learn, continue to do to help you to continue to grow. Okay. You also want to make sure that you're paying attention to comments, to reviews, and to direct messages, because these DMs and these messages, these reviews and these comments will give you insight into what your audience enjoys or wants more of. It takes a lot for someone who is listening to your podcast to actually reach out to you about your show and to share how much that message particularly impacted them. It's not really, human nature, if you will, to take a screenshot and send it over and tag and do all these things. People are busy. People want efficiency. So if someone is taking the time, right, to reach out to you about your content, be sure to reply to them and be grateful for that. It is so amazing. And it's so nice when listeners actually engage with your stuff. And it's going to make you feel super, super, super good. It's going to make them feel so good too, because they're going to be able to hear you and get to know you better. And you create that relationship even more, turning someone ultimately into a super fan of your pod, which is really important. The next thing that we can do is creating surveys and polls. So I personally haven't done these, but this is something that you can do, creating surveys or polls to gather different information or feedback from your listener, from your audience, about maybe episodes that they want to hear about, things that they want to create. I've never done an actual survey, but I always put stuff in my Instagram stories to say, okay, would you prefer this or this? Do you want to learn about this or do you want to learn about this? And that really helps and directs what it is I'm going to create next. If someone, for example, on this podcast wants to hear more about SEO strategies, well, I have a whole series coming up in the next 4-part series all about SEO strategies. Okay. So making sure that you're listening to your community and listening to hear their overall satisfaction is really key. But then you can also ask about their preferences and what would they like to hear more of in your future episodes. So it's a really great way to create that conversation around your show and just to get more insight from your listener overall. So the next thing that I want to touch on as well here is social media engagement. So you want to monitor your social media platforms related to your podcast. You want to make sure that you are paying attention to, again, comments or things that people have said about your episodes. Did they love a conversation? Is it something that they shared to their stories? Are they grateful for the message or whatever the sentiment is? You want to be aware and you want to understand it, okay? Look at your likes, look at your shares, look at your comments, and look at your mentions because these will help you gauge the level of interest in your episodes. Some episodes just happen to do better than others, and that is okay. It can be for so many different reasons, like who the guest is, what the topic is, where that episode finds your listener in the moment that they need it. So super, super key to just keep an eye on your social media and make sure that you're auditing that continuously. Then another thing that you can do here is episode specific call to action. So CTAs. Include those specific CTAs in your episodes. We all have an outro of our podcast, and in the episode, you're asking people to rate, review, subscribe, so on, whatever it is that you're doing, right? When you create a specific CTA in your episode, encouraging listeners to share their thoughts on social media, leave reviews, or participate in different discussions, you're opening up that communication, opening up that two-way communication, which is really, really, really important for your listener. You can also create unique hashtags that are specific to your podcast or specific to you or your personal brand or your business or whatever it is that you are doing. And you can check and see how many posts are in that hashtag. Are other people starting to use it? And then you can also track conversations related to specific episodes. So if you use specific hashtags for different episodes, you can start to see the type of content that people are creating and consuming within that hashtag. And is that where you want to be? Is that the audience that resonates most with your content? Okay. The next thing that we're going to talk about is Google Analytics for podcast websites. So you can have a dedicated website for your podcast if you want to, but you can also have this on your regular website, or you can also have this on your regular website and just have it be a tab that people can click on. But you can link up your Google Analytics to track your website traffic, to track your page views, and to track user behavior. Where are people coming in from? You can see that on Google Analytics. You can see that on Google Analytics. You can see where people are coming in from, the source of the traffic, and where they're going and how they're getting to your podcast page. So that is super, super key. It's a really cool way just to see where your audience is coming from. Another really cool thing that it's going to do is analyze which episodes are getting the most attention on your website. So that is really a cool way to see which episodes are resonating most with people. The next thing that you want to take a look at is your retention rates. So you can talk to your audience directly through a survey, right? You can ask them, for example, how long episodes do you prefer? Do you prefer 10 minutes, 20 minutes, 30 minutes? Do you still like 40-minute episodes? And just kind of understanding and getting a little bit of a survey from your audience, a little bit of an understanding of what it is that they are doing, how they're consuming content, and also their user behavior is super important as well. And you can also ask them to tell you what are their favorite episodes, what is their preferred episode length, and the topics that they find the most interesting. The next piece we're going to touch on very quickly is collaborating with your listeners. You can feature your listener questions. You can read a review. You can share feedback you've received on an episode. You can thank people for reaching out and for providing such thoughtful information or thoughtful insight about your episode and how you really appreciated the conversation you had about that. This allows you to integrate their input into your content and makes people feel like they are just part of what it is that you're creating, which is really important, that relationship piece, right? You also want to make sure that you're tracking your trends over time. So you want to analyze your podcast's performance over several different episodes or seasons. One thing that I see creators do often, especially when it comes to their podcast, is looking at the downloads instantly. It doesn't work like that. And you're only going to set yourself up for disappointment because if that podcast episode doesn't hit the number that you're wanting it to in the first 5, 6, 7 hours, it's not a fair representation of the impact that podcast can have. Within my agency, we do quarterly analytics for all of our clients. So every quarter we go through and we take a look, what does every single month look like? What was the percentage of growth based off of the same time last year? What's the content that performed the best and why? And we do this on a quarterly basis because this is the way you can see what your trends are. This is how you can see which episodes did better and which ones didn't. You need to give your content a certain amount of time for it to get down to your audience, right? Not everyone is listening to your podcast episode as soon as you release it. Not everyone is opening your email right away. Not everyone is heading to your YouTube channel right away. Some people are, but not everybody is. And that's why we have 7-day stats, 30-day stats, 90-day stats, and then all-time stats. So you want to make sure that you are paying attention to what those trends are and how the episodes are continuing to grow. That will give you way more insight than taking a look at your podcast episode as soon as it's been released. It also is going to help you identify patterns and themes that constantly and consistently generate higher engagement for you. The next thing that we can do as well is a competitor analysis. So analyze what topics and approaches are popular in your specific niche market. What is it that your competitors are talking about? How is it that they're presenting their information, right? What is the tone that they're taking and how is it resonating with their audience? Understand how your podcast compares to others in terms of engagement and relevance and the content that you're putting out there. Of course, we want to take a look at our performance metrics, which is really important too. So exploring again, like I mentioned, those KPIs, those podcast downloads, the listener demographics, etc. You can do this through creating an analytics tracker. I have this in my membership. It is literally plug and play. You just make a copy of the document and you can plug it in right there. My membership is $11 a month and you get access to a crazy resource bank of every single thing that you need for your podcast launch, production, management, monetization, all of it. Okay. I will say this too. Having a document where you're tracking your analytics is going to make you just so much more aware of what it is that you're creating. And I'll give you a tangible example. So my other podcast, it's called Happiness Happens. I took a hiatus for an entire year and obviously my downloads plummeted in that year. I was still getting downloads, but it was nothing the same of what I was getting before. So I picked back up the show in April of this year of 2023. And when I did that, I focused on the conversation, focused on the marketing of the conversation, so on, so on. So it took a few months, actually quite a few months, from April probably until November. November, we saw the highest downloads. In November, we saw the highest amount of downloads that we had seen in like 2 years of the podcast. And the only way that I would have known that or paid attention to that was if I was properly tracking my analytics. So go get your copy of my analytics tracker. The link is below for you to grab the membership. And then you can check out all the other resources that we have in there as well, because it's super, super important. And the last thing that I want to talk about today in this episode, thanks for sticking with me to the end, is guest and interview analysis. So think about the guests that you had on your podcast. Which ones did you like the most? Which ones did you maybe like the least? Which conversations inspired you the most? And maybe which conversations could you have been like, okay, well, that was nice, but maybe not again, right? Evaluate the impact of your guests and the interviews on your podcast. Did your guests share? And when they shared, did you see an increase in downloads? The quality of the guests that you're going to bring on your podcast is super, super important. There are experts in all kinds of fields in every single niche market. And you want to make sure that the person you're bringing on your show is in integrity with your podcast, integrity with you as the creator, right? And you want to make sure that they are invested in your mission just the same way that you are. And this is why I always ask my podcast guests to share the episodes with their audience. Because if they don't want to share the conversation, then to me, it feels like they're not proud of the conversation that we had. And podcasting is a two-way street with your audience. And so it's really, really, really important that when you're bringing someone on your show, or vice versa, you're going on their show, that you're creating that energy exchange of gratitude, of sharing, of expansion, and of togetherness. And so I think it's really key to take a look at your guests, which ones align the most with you, and also which ones would you have back again. That's really, really awesome too. So thank you for joining me today for our conversation. I know there's so much here that you can take out, that you can implement, that you can roll into your own podcast auditing process. If you have any questions, just send me a message. Send me a DM. Find me on Instagram at Simona with 2 underscores Costantini. You can find me there. And I'm just always so happy to answer your questions. So happy to chat with you. Thank you for tuning into today's episode. Share with me when you message me one thing that you took away from this conversation that you're going to implement into your podcast. Amazing. Thanks again. I hope you have a beautiful day, and I will see you on the next one.